Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, I'm gonna give you the results of an experiment that took me 3 years to complete. The main question I was trying to answer is what is the best exterior paint to use for a home or building? In my climate, the biggest issue we run into is fading and peeling, so that's what I was trying to test. If you just want the big grand finale result, the hands down winner, which was a huge surprise, and it was probably the one paint I did not want it to be, was PPG's Permanizer. There are a few caveats with that, one being that I bought it at the PPG store, not Home Depot. I believe at the time I started this experiment, it wasn't available at Home Depot, and I just learned that they use different colorant systems, so I don't know if that's gonna affect the results. But long story short, the Permanizer outperformed everything else. If that's all you're looking for, there you go. The reason why I didn't want it to be that paint is that's the one paint that I've never used on a house, where I've used all the other paints that I'm going to talk about today. Another ironic thing is about 3 years ago when I painted these, I did a video on what paint covers the best, and Permanizer won that as well, which again, totally unexpected. So that's why I'm just saying, yeah, it's hands down. I mean, it's Permanizer did the best, like in every aspect. So before I dive deep into the results, I want to explain how this came to be in my thought process, so that if you're wondering like, well, why didn't you test that one in the blue color or something like that, hopefully this will help you understand like how this came to be, what happened, the mistakes I made, and you know, what I would have done different had I known what I know now. So I actually had this idea a long time ago. We were using Sherwin-Williams and clients asked, you know, how much longer is it gonna last if I buy the better paint versus like, you know, you got your good, better, best. And I would always just kind of regurgitate what other people would say, and I would also just kind of tell them the truth, like, I really don't know. You know, I've done hundreds of estimates, and one of the questions I usually ask is like, what paint was used before? And a lot of times I didn't really notice that big of a difference between whether they use this paint or that paint. So I actually was like, what color fades the most? Because that's one of our biggest issues here in Colorado. I was like, let's get black. Let's get it good, better, best. I got Duracraft Super Paint Emerald from Sherwin-Williams. I painted black wood, put it out on the roof of my office, and left it there. I went back to get the results and somebody had seen it and thrown it away. It was like a commercial building, so that stunk. But I was like, okay, let's try this again, because ultimately what my painting company is trying to do is we want to just make sure we're offering the best value to our client. And previously when like a client would ask me or other painters, you know, what's the best paint? I always felt like, at least for myself being a painter, we're answering that question from a standpoint of like application and ease of use, right? So like, does it sag? Does it fling off your roller when you're rolling it? Does it cover well? Is it easy to get? All that kind of stuff, but never really from the aspect of like, what's gonna be the longest lasting and most durable? And I would go back to old houses I painted and looked, but I never felt like it was a fair comparison because like, well, this one has a tree that's shading it, or this one was facing more like northeast and that one was north. And it's just, you know, very hard to really have a strong opinion. So in my area, the biggest players, I guess, or the biggest paint companies, in my opinion, was Benjamin Moore, Sherwin-Williams, Behr, and there are some PPG stores here, but there's not a lot. That's like a new recent thing where I know in different parts of the country it's, you know, different. But that's why I tested these four right here, and I was like, well, let's just do the best paint, right? Because if you ask these manufacturers, all of them claim they have the best paint. So I went with at the time, the top of the line paint, which is another bummer. It's like, man, it's only been 3 years. And 2 out of the 4 came out with a better paint since that, just 3 years ago. So of course I'm gonna test those and I'll continue to test, but you know, Emerald from Sherwin-Williams, they came out with this new one called Emerald Rain Refresh. And then Behr, it used to be Marquee, and then they came out with this Dynasty paint, which ironically, all these paints are lifetime warranties, but none of them actually warranty fading. But I don't think it's a real warranty, and my rep doesn't really give me a direct answer. It says 10-year color fade protection, whatever that means, right? So it's like, well, if it fades in 5 years, are you guys gonna replace the paint? And right now, I don't really get the best answer. It's not clear. So of course, another thing that was a huge bummer is I tested resilience, and because that's a really popular paint in my area and people have used it, and as luck would have it, they discontinued it and they brought out this paint, which is called Latitude. I don't know if they're completely different paints, if they just swapped the label. You know, if you Google it, some sources will be like, oh yeah, it's the same paint, they just changed it, where others say, you know, it's different. Whatever the case is, of course, just in that 3 short years, they discontinued one of the paints I tested and replaced it with this guy here. So of course, I'm gonna test with this again and we'll see if we get similar results or different results or what happens. And I want to test a lot more paints, and I want to test 3 colors. I did blue and red because they tend to fade. I also want to throw in green just because if you look at a color wheel, I think that's a well-balanced mix. And I think based on my results that the color does actually play a bigger factor than I previously thought in its performance, which was one of the shocking results. So that's why I tested those 4 paints. They're the easiest paints for me to get, in my opinion, the biggest players for my area, and that at the time was their top of the line paint. Now I had used a lot of Sherwin-Williams, so I also wanted to test some Sherwin-Williams. So I wanted to do that like good, better, best thing. So I went with their Duracraft, which was like their builder grade exterior paint, the Resilience, which is like their middle of the road paint, and then obviously Emerald, which was the top of the line, just so I could kind of get an answer on like, what is good, better, best? Like, what does it give in value to the customer to jump up to that better paint? And then I've also used Behr, and previously I've tried to like research and find out like, has anybody done these studies? And the only thing I could find out there was Consumer Reports. And their results were very interesting and kind of baffling. And they've changed over the years. So they rate paints on different things, but one of the things they rate is appearance. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but out of these big, 4 players, there was only one paint that was excellent after 6 years for their appearance rating, which I would think is like color retention, fading, that sort of thing. And what was surprising was it was the Premium Plus from Behr, which is not their top of the line paint. So 3 years ago when I actually did this experiment, their Marquee, which was the top of the line paint, performed way worse than this paint here, the Behr Premium Plus. So that was just like, wow, like according to Consumer Reports, they're saying you shouldn't buy the high-end one, you should buy the lower one because according to their test, it performed better. What was weird was a few years later, they all of a sudden changed Marquee and said that it was good now, but it still didn't have excellent appearance after 6 years, it was good. But they give a number rating system and they rate it just slightly above this paint. So that's why I was like, hey, I want to test this and just see like what's going on with that. Why are they saying that? And see if I could duplicate the results. And then real quick about Consumer Reports, I went back and looked. They haven't actually tested the Permanizer from PPG. And then these 2 paints here, which is Duracraft from Sherwin-Williams, E600 from Behr, they haven't tested those paints either. I just thought that was worth knowing since I mentioned Consumer Reports. And then Behr also has this paint, it's E600, which is their most cost-effective exterior paint. It was the most cost-effective paint that I could buy from those brands. So I definitely wanted to, again, do good, better, best, and just see what the results were. So that's why I have these paints here that I've tested. I do have the black, even though somebody threw away my first experiment that I put on that roof. I redid it because I had the black, and I also got the Behr Premium Plus. And I also did something else. So I was doing research online to see like, how do you make paint not fade? And I did find one additive where it had these crazy claims. At least at the time, I think they might have changed it. They said lifetime fade warranty, transferable, like it'll never fade. So I'm like, okay, I want to buy that. And essentially what I think it is, and I could be wrong, but I've always, when I do my spiel on what paint is, it's like, well, it's resin that protects your house, and then there's colorant, which gives it the appearance. It's like you're just putting pure resin into the paint. So the way it mixes is you have a gallon of paint, you put a quart of this additive in, which I'm pretty sure is just resin. Another surprising thing is you can definitively see that additive did improve the quality of the paints that I tested it in. And I tested it in different paints, which was again shocking. I don't think it's gonna resist fading forever, but it definitely, you can see a difference in the sheen and the color retention when you add that paint in, as well as the peeling. So I'll go over those results, but that was kind of my thought process and like what I tested and whatnot. But I want to test more paints. I want to test like these 4, but they're good, better, best. And I want to do the 3 colors because as I'll explain here in a minute, I do think the color has something to do with it. So like with Consumer Reports, I don't know what color they're testing, but I would not be surprised if that is what's actually tipping the scales one way or another more than the product. Maybe I'm wrong, but this kind of just opened up a can of worms and has a lot of surprising results. So just to explain the actual experiment I did, I got these 1-foot siding boards, at least the most common siding in my area, where it's not real wood, it's like got a fake laminate or texture to it. So there's actually 3 sections to each board. So what I did was I primed one section, then I painted the whole thing and made sure there was full coverage. When you're rolling on paints, sometimes you have to put on an extra coat to get full coverage. but I just made sure that there was full coverage. I think with the red, I had to do it twice, and that would be a wet on dry coat. When you're spraying, you can kind of spray it again right after you just painted it, which would be like a wet on wet coat to get, you know, full coverage. But my point is, I had full coverage, so we basically had a third of the board where there was primer underneath it. Then I taped off each side and I rolled another coat in the middle because I was trying to understand for fading, does more coats actually help with fading? Does priming do much? So these boards were more for fading because when I look at houses, usually this doesn't peel very often, but what does peel is like real wood, so like door frames, railings, that sort of thing. So I just got some cheap 2x4s and I painted them. But what I did was half the board I primed, the other half I didn't prime to see what kind of a difference the priming made. And again, shocking results, which I'll share. And then what I did was I took that resin, I mixed it in, and I mixed up other boards. Like I tested the black resin, not resin, and I've got a bunch of other boards there and some 2x4s back there where I use the resin, just to see like, did that make a difference? And then I put them out on some land where there was nothing around. So the idea is, as soon as the sun comes up, this is getting sun, and all the way till it goes down, this is getting sun. Because if you think about it, a house with 4 sides, you know, maybe a third to half the day is getting sun, depending on what side it is. And these were flat and horizontal, which is gonna give it the harshest conditions because I'm trying to accelerate it so we don't have to wait 10 years to really see the results. And most of these lifetime warranty paints, if you read the small print, they don't cover fading and they don't cover flat horizontal surfaces. And it's for those reasons they get beat up really bad. So I left them out in the elements and I did clean them one time. It was after 1 year. I went with a rag and cleaned them just because some had gotten like some bird poop and stuff. And I was worried that like, oh, that's gonna affect the results. But then I realized like, hey, I should see if it accumulates dirt and dust. So I left it for 2 years and didn't clean it, just so you understand the history. So now I just want to go over the most shocking results, and then I'll give you a deep dive on like everything and, you know, just what I found. The most shocking result to me by far was the cheapest paint I tested almost got first place. Like it is a very, very close second, which obviously I would have never expected. But this E600, the sheen looks incredible. The color retention is incredible. And I mean, I'll put them side by side. I mean, they're almost identical. That was super unexpected. They're like, oh, the most cost-effective paint I could buy is performing arguably the best. The reason I gave it to Permanizer is when it came to the peeling, the Permanizer did better with the peeling. Now, from that painter's perspective though, a lot of my painters, we've used this paint before and they don't like it because it doesn't cover as well. So it makes it harder for the application. But in terms of, you know, keeping its sheen, color retention, how clean it looks after time, that was like completely unexpected, and I just don't even know what to make of that. Especially because I'm testing Marquee, Premium Plus, E600. I would have never thought that the E600 would outperform these two on, yeah, sheen and color retention, fading. Like it's just really unexpected. A quick note, when you're looking at these boards, at first I tried to just glue them down, but the area I have them gets really strong winds and they would like blow off of this little platform I had them on. So there are some holes in the center of the board. I basically just tacked it down with a finish nail. So if you see those holes, those aren't from like it peeling or the paint breaking down or anything like that. That was just me just trying to keep the boards from flying off in the wind. So another thing that was really surprising was I tested Sherwin-Williams in the 2 different colors, and it appeared that the red tended to collect dirt and dust more, or maybe it just showed it better. But like when I was looking at it up close, like to me it at least looked like the red like attracted and collected dirt and dust more than the blue. And that was the one area where the emerald didn't perform as good as the other top 4, was that it just seemed to collect more dirt and dust. Perhaps that's why they came out with this, where the main selling point is that it doesn't collect dirt and dust. They actually say it's self-cleaning technology, where I believe it's hydrophobic, or like, you know, stuff beads off of it and whatnot. So the reason why I think color might come into play on how well different products do is another shocking thing was in the reds, all of the reds experienced some kind of color shift. The least was the E600 and the Permanizer, but they all got more orange or more of like a lighter red, where the Behr Premium Plus was different. It actually got like a darker red. So it shifted in like the opposite direction. Also with the blues, all the blues turned a lighter blue, except for the Sherwin-Williams Emerald looks to have actually shifted the other way and gotten darker. So that was just surprising, and I really don't know what to make of that. But that's where I think like, well, whatever color you're testing might actually have a higher impact than one might suspect. Like maybe that's what's going on with Consumer Reports. I'm not sure what color they're testing, but that was a really shocking result. But another really surprising thing with the good, better, best with Sherwin-Williams is something was wrong with this resilience paint with this particular color. I wish I would have done a blue board in the resilience. I didn't. I did, however, do the blue 2x4. And the blue doesn't look to have faded the same way this did, but you can clearly see this is just by far the worst. It looks like a completely different color now. And this was noticeable after year 1. So the resilience for the blue doesn't seem to have faded, but it was really bad, obviously, here. And something that was unique with the resilience was they actually made that one in a different base, a red base. So I thought the reason for that was to, improve the quality versus doing like the ultra deep base, but I'm not an expert, but that was surprising, right? That like, hey, the middle of the road one, the resilience actually did worse than the most cost effective and obviously what you'd expect, the high end one. But I wish I would have done the blue so I could get a better idea of like, did it fade bad? But you can see, at least with the 2x4, you can clearly see it. To me, at least, it looks like there was more peeling on the resilience. Another surprising thing was when I painted these, there was 100% full coverage, but after sitting out in the sun, you can now see through the paint, or you can see what was underneath the paint, whether that was primer or just the siding board, which I don't see that on houses almost ever. So that was kind of surprising. Another really surprising thing is this is the same black. We got Duracraft Super Paint Emerald. And at least at this stage, after 3 years, I don't really see much of a difference. If anything, I could argue the Emerald looks like you can't see through it as much, where I can see the undercoat or the original siding board on these a little bit more. Which, like I said, when I painted it, it was pure black. You couldn't see anything. But I'm just surprised that, there's not, at least at this stage of the game, a big difference between them. Another really good lesson or surprising thing is it definitely looks like the multiple coats helped with fading. I can see on the blue specifically a clear line down the middle that seems to have held its color better and not faded as much. This black was the exact same when I painted it. I added the resin to this board and not to this board, and I mean, you can see there's a big difference. The color is held better, the sheen is held better. I do think the difference was most apparent in the black. Here's all the boards that I treated with that additive. So up top they have the additive. The common theme is the sheen looks to be more intact, the color possibly even better as well, and also I see less peeling on the boards that were treated. 3 years ago when I put in the additive, it didn't affect the color at all. It was indistinguishable from the original color, but now you can see the one with the additive definitely is richer in color and has more sheen. It'll be interesting to see as time goes on if that difference gets bigger or smaller. Another shocking result, which makes me want to test different primers, was that it didn't look like the primer, at least the one that I used, helped in terms of peeling. For instance, this is Aura from Benjamin Moore. This side I primed. This side I didn't prime. The side I primed looks in worse shape than the side I didn't prime. So, not sure what that means. However, I have another Aura one I'll show you, where the difference is, on some of the boards I left this side open, and I painted the bottoms and the rest of the sides, and my idea was a lot of siding boards sit like this, and you can't really paint the bottom because they're like up against concrete or something, and I wanted to see if having a closed bottom affected the edge. It didn't appear that it made a difference. Just FYI, it still peeled on the edge even though the bottom was completely sealed, but that's why I did that. But then if we look at another Aura one, right here, I left the bases open and this side was primed and this side was not. And, it looks more even. If anything, again, there's a little bit more peeling on the side that was primed. So I guess my two hypotheses is maybe it has to do with like the wood. Maybe it was just unlucky that this side had like more grain in it or something. Or, they do say it's a paint and primer in one. Maybe because I just used a generic primer. I honestly don't even remember what primer it was. That's a mistake I won't make again. But that, it held better where we didn't prime because the, primer and the paint did better. Again, totally unexpected. I don't know what to make of these results. I'm just telling you what I see. But obviously, I definitely want to test different primers to see how that does. All right, let me know if you are as surprised as I was down in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you are into this kind of thing and want to see future experiments, consider subscribing.